Imagine typing like a super casual celebratory tweet about your infant nephew.
Right, just a normal family update.
Yeah, exactly. You hit send, and then you realize you just structurally, mathematically insulted him to millions of people.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And not because you intended to or, harbor some secret animosity toward the baby.
I would hope not.
Right. But simply because you misused a single, seemingly harmless conjunction.
Just one word.
One word. So welcome to the deep dive. Today we are tearing down the hidden load-bearing walls of the English language.
Which is something we don't usually think about.
Not at all. I mean, we usually treat everyday communication as something fluid, like it's forgiving. A system where people generally know what we mean, even if we fumble the phrasing a bit.
Yeah, we rely a lot on context and just assuming the other person gets the gist.
Exactly. But language actually operates on incredibly rigid, almost invisible mathematical rules.
It really does. It's structural.
And when you break those rules on a massive public stage, the results are just catastrophic for your intended meaning.
The fallout is fascinating to watch, honestly, especially because most speakers are entirely unaware of the structural collapse happening in their own sentences.
They just don't see it.
No, they treat vocabulary as mere decoration rather than like mechanical architecture.
And that architectural collapse is exactly what we are putting under the microscope for you, the listener, today. Our source material is this remarkably dense piece of late-night television.
It's a great clip.
It really is. We are analyzing a transcript from The Late Show with Stephen Colbert.
Specifically, it's a segment where he critiques a list by Vice writer Eve Pizer.
Right. This list that catalogs various instances where Ivanka Trump purportedly used vocabulary incorrectly on social media and in public interviews.
And we should probably put a big disclaimer here right at the top.
Yes, absolutely. For you, the listener, we want to be incredibly clear up front about our mission. We aren't here to endorse the comedian's politics, and we aren't here to critique the political figure mentioned.
Right, we're not taking any political sides today.
Zero. We are treating this transcript strictly as a linguistic laboratory.
Just purely analytical.
Exactly. We are stripping away the partisan context entirely to examine the fascinating gears and levers of the language itself. We want to understand the exact cognitive mechanics of why these sentences fail.
And how comedians weaponize those failures for entertainment.
Because comedy, particularly this kind of analytical satire, it relies heavily on shared linguistic contracts, doesn't it?
Oh, completely. A comedian can't write a joke about a misused word unless the audience inherently understands the unspoken rules that govern that word.
The audience has to be in on the math.
Right. So by deconstructing the jokes, we are essentially reverse engineering the cognitive science of human communication.
Which is just so cool.
It is. We get to look at the psycholinguistics of sentence parsing, the history of how words acquire moral weight, and the precise moment a listener's brain registers a logical fallacy.
So it's really about moving beyond just pointing and laughing at a mistake. We want to really dig into the how and the why of the error. We're going to explore how exploiting a word with too much flexibility creates comedic subversion.
And why attempting to redefine a rigid word causes major cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, and the sheer syntactic chaos of a garden path sentence.
Yeah.
We'll get to all that. Let's start, though, by looking at what happens when a speaker utilizes a word that has a little too much elasticity.
Okay, yeah. Lexical ambiguity.
Right. So in the source material, Colbert pulls a quote where Ivanka Trump is discussing her and her husband Jared Kushner's morning routine.
And she says, "My husband has incredibly long hours, so I try to keep mine on a relative basis."
Right. And Colbert immediately fires back with his punchline. You think she'd know how to use relative because her whole career is on a relative basis?
And the audience reaction there is massive.
Huge. But to understand why that lands so hard, from a linguistic perspective, we need to look at the concept of polysemy.
Right.
Poly, meaning many. So we're talking about a single word possessing a cluster of related meanings, right?
Exactly. It's like how the head of a human body is conceptually related to the head of a corporation.
Oh, that's a perfect example. So it's not just a coincidence that they sound the same.
No, not at all. That conceptual relationship is the defining characteristic of polysemy, and it totally distinguishes it from simple homonymy.
Homonyms being words that just sound alike by accident.
Right, through historical accident, like the barks of a dog and the bark of a tree. They have completely different etymological roots.
A polysemy is different.
Yeah, polysemy is an evolutionary feature of human language.
Wait, really? How so?
Well, think about it. If we had to invent a brand new, completely unique phonetic sound for every single distinct concept in the human experience,
We'd run out of sounds.
our brains would literally collapse under the sheer storage requirement. Our working memory just cannot handle infinite distinct vocabularies.
That makes total sense.
So language evolved to be highly efficient. We take a core concept and we stretch it to cover adjacent ideas.
Like reaching for a multi-tool.
Exactly. We use relative to describe proportion, something considered in relation to something else, and we also use it to describe a family member.
Because a family member is someone whose existence is fundamentally defined in relation to you.
You nailed it. The brain is basically conserving energy by recycling the structural concept of relation.
But this efficiency, it creates a massive vulnerability for the speaker, doesn't it?
Oh, a huge one.
Because if language is a multi-tool, polysemy means every tool has multiple functions attached to the exact same handle.
Right.
So the speaker reaches into their pocket, intending to pull out the screwdriver to fix a hinge, meaning they intend to use relative as a proportional adjective to describe their work hours.
But because the tool is clustered, the comedian can reach in and forcefully pull out the corkscrew.
And pop the bottle. So why does the brain find this specific type of error so ripe for comedy? I mean, is it just the listener intentionally misunderstanding?
Well, the comedian's intervention here relies on a psychological framework known as incongruity resolution theory.
Incongruity resolution.
Yeah, because, the human brain is just this relentless prediction machine.
We're always trying to guess what comes next.
Always. When we listen to someone speak, we do not passively wait for them to finish their sentence before we begin interpreting.
We'd be so far behind if we did that.
We are actively predicting the end of their sentence and the meaning of their words in real time based on the immediate context.
Is that something we can actually measure?
Oh, absolutely. In psycholinguistics, this is observed through eye tracking studies during reading or neuroimaging during listening. So as the speaker discusses work hours and schedules, the listener's brain primes itself for professional vocabulary.
Right.
When the word relative appears, the brain instantly selects the proportional definition and it suppresses the family definition.
The cognitive prediction resolves smoothly.
Exactly.
My brain accepts the screwdriver because we were talking about a hinge. The sentence, well, maybe a bit clunky. I mean, on a relative basis, is certainly a roundabout way of saying proportional. It makes sense within the narrow corridor of that specific paragraph.
It does. But then Colbert introduces the incongruity.
The corkscrew.
Right. A comedian's fundamental job in this type of structural satire is to derail the audience's cognitive prediction.
But they have to do it in a way that makes sense, right?
Yes. They do so using a secondary logic that is even more compelling than the speaker's original intent.
So he takes the suppressed definition of relative, the family member, and forcefully injects it back into the sentence.
He does. However, just changing the definition isn't enough to generate a laugh. You can't just throw a random word in.
Right, that would just be confusing.
The cognitive whiplash only translates into comedy if the new definition aligns perfectly with an unspoken, universally recognized truth about the speaker.
Which, in this specific case, is the semiotics of the speaker's public identity.
Exactly. The comedian is tapping into the broader cultural discourse surrounding nepotism and her position within her father's administration.
He pivots the entire context of the word from work hours to career origins.
He executes a flawless frame shift. He is pointing out a critical vulnerability in public communication.
Yeah.
You never speak in a vacuum.
Your words are always filtered through your persona.
Well, filtered through the semiotics of your public identity. So the logical fallacy we are examining here isn't a grammatical failure.
Because grammatically, her sentence is fine.
Right. The failure is the speaker's inability to audit their own vocabulary for associative risk.
Associative risk. I love that term.
When you occupy a public role that is heavily scrutinized for family connections, utilizing a highly polysemous word like relative in any context is an unforced error.
It's like leaving a back door wide open in the architecture of your sentence. And the comedian simply walks through that back door and points out that the foundation was compromised to begin with. The audience laughs because their brains experience this sudden, involuntary resolution of that dual meaning.
They realize the alternate definition actually fits the macro context of her life better than the intended definition fits the micro context of the sentence.
That is wild. So Colbert weaponizes the extreme flexibility of a word to subvert the speaker's intent.
Yes, exactly.
But as we move through this transcript, the comedic strategy completely flips when we encounter a speaker trying to manipulate a word that has absolutely no flexibility.
Right. It is one thing to exploit ambiguity. It is a completely different linguistic crisis when you try to forcefully bend a rigid definition.
So this brings us to segment 2 and the word complicit.
Oh, this is a fascinating one. This brings us to a phenomenon heavily analyzed in corpus linguistics. Semantic valence.
Semantic valence. Let's break that down.
Words are not inert, neutral blocks of data. They carry an inherent historical and deeply ingrained emotional or moral charge.
Let's anchor this in the source material before we unpack the linguistics further. Colbert plays an interview clip where the speaker is directly asked about being complicit in controversial policies.
And her response is just incredible. She says, if being complicit is wanting to be a force for good and to make a positive impact, then I'm complicit.
Right. Followed shortly in the exact same interview by the admission, I don't know what it means to be complicit.
This is just an amazing cell phone.
And Colbert cuts back to his desk, looks directly at the camera, and delivers a completely flat, deadpan response. He just says, it doesn't mean that.
Yeah.
It is incredibly striking because it barely feels like a joke. It feels like a factual correction. So semantic valence, is it essentially the inherent magnetic charge of a word?
It operates very much like a magnetic pole, yes. In linguistics, valence refers to the intrinsic attractiveness or aversiveness of an event, object, or situation described by a word.
Okay, so good or bad vibes, essentially.
Essentially. The word complicit possesses a strictly universally negative valence. Etymologically, it is tied to the Latin complicare, meaning to fold together.
To fold together, like being wrapped up in something.
Right. But in its modern legal and moral application, it specifically denotes being involved with others in an illegal activity or a moral wrongdoing.
It is inextricably tethered to the concept of shared guilt.
It is not a neutral descriptor of participation. It is an indictment.
But wait, I can hear the counter-argument forming from our listeners. Language isn't static, right?
It's not, no.
It is a living, breathing social contract that shifts over time. We see semantic reclamation happen constantly, especially in slang and subcultures. Like in the 1990s, the word wicked shifted from meaning evil to meaning incredibly good.
Wicked awesome.
Right. Sick shifted from meaning ill to meaning impressive or cool. Marginalized communities frequently reclaim historically oppressive slurs and invert their valence to strip them of their power.
They absolutely do.
So why is this specific attempt to redefine complicit viewed by the comedian and the audience as a massive, laughable failure of logic, rather than just a rhetorical flourish or an attempt at organic linguistic evolution?
That's a great question. The distinction lies in the mechanics of power, consensus, and logical argumentation.
Okay, how so?
Well, organic semantic reclamation, like the shift of wicked or sick, is a decentralized, negotiated shift that occurs across a community over decades.
It's natural.
Right. It requires a collective social consensus. What we are observing in this transcript is a highly centralized, unilateral attempt at manipulation.
Which is entirely different.
Completely. And in philosophy and debate, this is categorized as a specific logical fallacy, the definitional retreat.
The definitional retreat. I've also heard this referred to as the Humpty Dumpty fallacy.
Yes.
Which just seems bizarrely appropriate for a discussion about fragile things falling apart.
It really does. The term stems from Lewis Carroll's Through the Looking Glass, which, by the way, is essentially a master text on the philosophy of language.
People think it's just a children's book, but it's really deep.
So deep. In the book, Humpty Dumpty famously declares to Alice, "When I use a word, it means just what I choose it to mean, neither more nor less."
And Alice pushes back, right?
She does. She questions whether you can actually make words mean so many different things. And Humpty Dumpty's chilling response is, the question is, which is to be master, that's all.
Wow.
Yeah. Carroll was illustrating the absurdity of nominalism taken to its extreme, demonstrating that language ceases to function if meaning is merely a function of individual authority rather than shared consensus.
So Humpty Dumpty is essentially the patron saint of bad faith arguments.
Basically, yeah.
It is the assertion that authority dictates reality, even at the molecular level of vocabulary.
Precisely. A definitional retreat occurs during an argument when someone realizes they are losing based on the mutually understood definition of a term.
So they're backed into a corner.
Right. And to escape the negative consequences of the argument, they unilaterally invent a new, highly idiosyncratic definition of the core term that suddenly frames them as the victor.
Just changing the rules of the game while you're playing it.
Exactly. The speaker is trapped by the universally agreed upon negative valence of complicit.
Because it means being involved in something bad.
So instead of addressing the accusation of moral wrongdoing, they attempt to sever the word from its historical weight, redefining it as wanting to be a force for good.
Which is just bananas. It's the logical equivalent of saying, if the definition of a thief is someone who borrows things indefinitely to bring joy to the universe, then yes, I am a thief.
That's a perfect analogy.
It is a complete abdication of the shared reality. It creates a massive amount of cognitive dissonance for the listener because you are violently jamming a universally negative concept against the phrase positive impact.
And that violent conceptual collision is what generates the comedic tension.
Our brains just can't handle it.
Literally. The audience's brain rejects the pairing. In cognitive science, this is known as a semantic violation.
Semantic violation.
Yeah. When you read or hear a sentence that violates semantic expectations, your brain produces a specific electrical spike known as the N400 effect.
Wait, there's a physical brain spike?
Yes. You can measure it on an EEG. The brain literally struggles to process the anomaly.
Oh, wow.
So the comedian doesn't need to write a traditional setup and punchline here because the speaker has inadvertently constructed an irreconcilable paradox.
And then the speaker completely detonates their own rhetorical strategy by immediately admitting, I don't know what it means to be complicit.
Which is the icing on the cake.
You cannot execute a Humpty Dumpty power play and claim to be the master of the word and then immediately concede that you don't even know what the word is.
No, it undercuts the entire mechanism of the definitional retreat.
Which is why Colbert's response is so lethally effective.
By merely stating it doesn't mean that, he refuses to engage with the altered reality.
He acts as the anchor to objective linguistics.
Right. The humor is derived from the sheer exhaustion of having to enforce the most basic tenets of the social contract.
It is the comedy of the exhausted fact-checker.
Yes.
Okay, so we have looked at how speakers can abuse abstract, heavily weighted moral definitions.
Like complicit.
But the stakes of the shared reality become even more glaring when someone breaks the rules of foundational physical reality.
Oh, this next one was my favorite.
We are moving from the manipulation of complex morality to the absolute misunderstanding of everyday timekeeping.
This example is arguably the most fascinating piece of the transcript precisely because the error is so incredibly mundane,
Right.
yet it reveals a profound disconnect from the democratizing structures of human existence.
Let's lay out the source material for this one. Colbert pulls up a tweet written by the speaker. It is a picture of a baby, accompanied by the text. I cannot believe that Theodore is 8 months old today. Happy birthday.
And Colbert just stares at the camera, completely baffled.
He escalates to a yell. Happy birthday! He's 8 months old. Either Ivanka doesn't get how birthdays work, or do rich people get more birthdays than we do?
And the studio audience just erupts.
They really do. But let's strip away the punchline for a second and look purely at the morphology of the word.
Okay, let's do.
Morphologically speaking, meaning if we isolate the individual components of birth and day, is it technically incorrect? I mean, it is the physical day of the month on which the birth occurred.
Well, if we were operating strictly on literal morphology, divorced from all historical and societal context,
Yeah.
you could theoretically argue that every time the calendar hits the 14th of a month, it is the birthday of someone born on the 14th.
Right.
However, human communication does not operate on raw morphology. We are governed by a linguistic process called semantic narrowing.
Semantic narrowing, so shrinking the meaning.
Over centuries, language communities take broad, literal terms and collectively agree to narrow their application to highly specific pragmatic functions.
So the broad concept of the day of your birth narrows down over generations into a rigid, singular, pragmatic function.
Which is the annual anniversary of birth, locked strictly to a 365-day solar cycle.
Exactly.
Semantic narrowing is how we create societal order. Without it, language would be unbearably vague.
We wouldn't know what anyone was talking about.
We have collectively engineered birthday to serve as a specific temporal milestone. When the speaker applies it to an 8-month mark, they are committing what philosophers and logicians call a category error.
I want to make sure we define that clearly for the listener.
Sure.
A category error is essentially taking the properties of one distinct classification and improperly assigning them to another.
Right.
It feels analogous to looking at your watch at 2:20 p.m., pulling out a ham sandwich, taking a bite, and declaring to your office, happy midnight snack.
Yes. That captures the cognitive dissonance perfectly.
Because the sandwich is technically food. It is technically a snack, but you have completely violated the temporal rules of the phrase.
You cannot simply unilaterally move midnight to the middle of the afternoon just because you are experiencing hunger.
Right.
The concept of the category error was introduced heavily by philosopher Gilbert Ryle. You are presenting things belonging to a particular category as if they belong to a different category.
So the speaker in the tweet is taking a monthly milestone.
Which is a completely legitimate category of celebration, by the way. Parents track monthly progress all the time.
Oh yeah, people post the little blocks with the months on them.
But she's treating it with the linguistic and celebratory markers of an annual milestone.
Mixing the categories.
The monthly category and the annual category possess different societal weight and different vocabularies. You can say happy 8-month anniversary. You cannot say happy birthday.
But here's the question. Why does a comedian turn this into a biting commentary on wealth?
Yeah, that's the pivot.
Because it is a mother posting a slightly clumsy tweet about her infant. It is arguably the lowest stakes error in the entire transcript. How does Colbert leverage a minor category error into a massive laugh line about class disparity?
Because time, calendars, and the concept of birthdays represent the ultimate, immutable, democratizing structures of human existence.
The great equalizers.
Exactly. The progression of time is perhaps the only system that wealth cannot officially alter.
No matter how much money you have.
Regardless of your socioeconomic status, your geographic location, or your political power, you only receive one birthday per year.
It is a rigid law of the shared human experience.
So when the speaker violates this universally understood foundational societal rule, it creates a massive sense of alienation.
It is the cognitive equivalent of watching someone confidently try to open a door that is merely painted onto a solid brick wall.
Yeah, like Wile E. Coyote.
Exactly. You don't just laugh. You genuinely stop and wonder, wait, do you fundamentally not understand how walls operate?
And Colbert harnesses that alienation using a classical rhetorical technique known as reductio ad absurdum, reduction to absurdity.
Reductio ad absurdum.
This technique dates back to classical Greek philosophy. You take an opponent's flawed logical premise and you aggressively follow it through to its most extreme, ridiculous conclusion.
To show how broken the foundation is.
In order to demonstrate how structurally unsound the original premise was. Exactly.
So Colbert observes the category error, the assertion that an 8-month mark qualifies as a birthday. And he essentially says, okay, let's assume her logic is sound.
Right, let's play this out.
Let's assume birthdays can occur multiple times a year. He then maps that absurd premise onto the most prominent semiotic marker of her public identity.
Which is her immense wealth.
Her wealth. He constructs a new satirical hypothesis. What if the physics of time are literally different for the ultra-wealthy? Do rich people get more birthdays than we do?
And the audience laughs because the linguistic error inadvertently positions the speaker as someone so detached from the struggles and realities of the general population that they don't even adhere to the basic laws of the Gregorian calendar.
So good.
The comedian didn't invent that detachment. He merely illuminated it by following the speaker's own broken logic to its terminus.
It's incredible how much societal commentary is packed into the misuse of a single compound word.
It really is.
But as jarring as it is to break the external rules of time, the linguistic stakes escalate dramatically when you begin breaking the internal rules of syntax.
Oh, syntax is where it gets really dangerous.
Because time is an external reality we all agree to navigate. But sentence structure is the internal skeletal scaffolding of the thought itself.
Right, it's how the thought is built.
If you fracture the scaffolding, you don't just sound out of touch. You can inadvertently reverse your entire intended meaning.
Which brings us to the segment of the transcript that represents the most catastrophic grammatical failure.
And arguably the most brilliant comedic deconstruction by Colbert.
Absolutely.
We are looking at the logic of conjunctions.
Okay.
Colbert introduces another tweet from the source material. It reads, "Cuddling my little nephew Luke, the best part of an otherwise incredible day."
It seems so sweet at first glance.
It does. Colbert reads the tweet, pauses, and delivers this assessment. That is a dumb statement in an otherwise stupid tweet.
And the audience response is deafening.
To truly appreciate the mechanics of this exchange, we have to isolate and deeply analyze the structural function of one specific word, otherwise.
Right. Many people mistakenly treat otherwise as a simple, harmless filler word.
Like they just throw it in to sound smart?
Exactly. They group it with transition phrases like moving on or furthermore, or in addition.
They assume it merely exists to keep the sentence moving forward and to add an air of sophistication.
But from a syntactic and logical standpoint, otherwise is an incredibly demanding structural pivot.
It's doing heavy lifting.
It is an adverb and a contrastive conjunction that strictly enforces a specific mathematical relationship between the clauses of a sentence.
Let's explore the psycholinguistics of that pivot. When the brain encounters a contrastive conjunction, what is it actually doing?
The brain is actively preparing to balance an equation. Otherwise, dictates that the circumstances previously mentioned are structurally opposed to the circumstances about to be described.
Structurally opposed. Okay.
It carves out a specific element and sets it in direct contrast to the general whole.
Give me an example.
So if I tell you the engine was completely destroyed, but it was an otherwise beautiful car, your brain effortlessly processes the contrast.
Let's do the linguistic math on that.
Okay.
If it is an otherwise beautiful car, that implies that if we conceptually remove the destroyed engine, if circumstances were different, the entirety of the vehicle is beautiful.
Right.
So the specific element, the destroyed engine, is negative. The general whole, the beautiful car, is positive.
Exactly. The word otherwise acts as the fulcrum balancing those opposing valences.
It requires a strict contrast in semantic valence.
If the general whole is positive, the carved-out specific element must mathematically be negative. If the general whole is negative, the specific element must be positive.
Okay, I follow.
And this brings us to the phenomenon of garden path sentences in psycholinguistics.
Garden path sentences, like leading someone down the garden path.
Yes, exactly. A garden path sentence is one where the reader's brain begins parsing the syntax with one expectation, only to hit a structural wall and realize the initial parsing was entirely incorrect.
Forcing them to rapidly reread and reevaluate.
Exactly.
And the tweet about the nephew creates an inescapable cognitive wall. Let's map out the exact equation the speaker constructed.
All right, let's look at the tweet again.
The tweet is, "Cuddling my little nephew Luke, the best part of an otherwise incredible day." The speaker establishes the general whole, an otherwise incredible day.
And incredible possesses a highly positive semantic valence.
Therefore, the syntax absolutely dictates that the specific element preceding the conjunction must carry a negative valence. Otherwise, commands the brain to contrast the specific with the general.
Which means structurally, grammatically, and logically.
Cuddling the nephew must have been terrible.
Yes.
She has accidentally stated that holding her infant nephew was the singular negative anomaly in a day that was incredibly positive.
She mathematically insulted the baby.
That is just amazing. From a purely syntactic standpoint, she absolutely did.
She forced a positive concept, the best part, into a structural slot that forcefully demands a negative valence while maintaining a positive whole.
The cognitive math simply doesn't compute.
The sentence collapses under its own structural weight. The result is a meaning that is the exact opposite of the speaker's emotional intent.
The question is, why does this happen? I mean, how does a native speaker of a language write a sentence that literally contradicts their own heart?
It's wild, isn't it?
It isn't a typo. It is a fundamental misunderstanding of the tool they are utilizing.
Sociolinguists refer to this as a combination of register confusion and hypercorrection.
Register confusion. Let's start there.
These are concepts heavily explored by sociolinguist William Labov. A register is the specific level of formality, complexity, and vocabulary expected in a particular social setting.
Okay, so you naturally utilize a casual register with your family,
Right.
a professional register in a boardroom, and an academic register in a thesis.
Precisely. So the speaker is attempting to shift out of the casual register of a social media post about a baby and adopt an elevated quasi-literary register.
I want to sound a bit more poetic.
Yes. They are reaching for transitional vocabulary that sounds sophisticated, words like otherwise, to imbue a simple emotional sentiment with an unearned gravity.
But this is where the hypercorrection comes in.
Exactly. Hypercorrection is the misapplication of a linguistic rule in an attempt to sound more educated or formal. The speaker recognizes otherwise as a high-register word, but they completely lack the understanding of its mathematical contrastive function.
They deploy the vocabulary purely as aesthetic decoration, rather than as a precise mechanism for meaning.
They treat a load-bearing column as if it were wallpaper.
Oh, that's a great way to put it. Which brings us to why Colbert's response is a masterclass in structural comedy.
It's so sharp.
He doesn't merely point out that the sentence is awkward. He doesn't just call her silly. He delivers this line: "A dumb statement in an otherwise stupid tweet.
Look at the architecture of what he just built.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
He mirrors her exact, flawed grammatical scaffolding to deliver a flawless, inescapable insult.
It is brilliant because he intentionally breaks the rule of the contrastive conjunction in the precise manner that she did,
Right.
but he does it to highlight the totality of the failure.
Let's do the math on a sentence.
Okay, let's break it down.
A dumb statement, that is the specific element being carved out.
Yeah.
Dumb carries a negative semantic valence
Right.
in an otherwise stupid tweet. As a general whole. Stupid also carries a negative valence.
The contrastive rule demands opposing valences. But Colbert provides negative and negative. The structural math fails.
But the failure is the punchline.
Yes.
He is utilizing the broken equation to state that there is no contrast to be found. He's saying the specific part is dumb, and if we remove it, everything else remaining is incredibly stupid as well.
He uses the absolute lack of contrast to trap the speaker in their own failed architecture.
He weaponizes the very rule she broke against her.
It demonstrates the difference between conversational implicature and syntactic reality.
Right.
The philosopher Paul Grace developed the maxims of conversation.
I'm vaguely familiar with Grace.
One of his maxims is the maxim of manner. Be clear, be orderly, and avoid obscurity of expression.
And she definitely violated that.
When you try to sound artificially elevated by using vocabulary you don't understand, you violate the maxim of manner, and you end up writing an equation that equals 0.
You forfeit your ability to communicate your actual intent.
Or, as we discovered, you end up writing an equation that publicly roasts your nephew.
Yeah, poor baby Luke. But Colbert doesn't stop at a single mirrored insult. A great comedian understands the power of satirical escalation.
Ah, the escalation here is legendary.
If pointing out one broken structural rule is funny, what happens when you decide to break every single rule simultaneously?
It's chaos.
If you take polysemy, the Humpty Dumpty fallacy, category errors, and contrastive failures, and you force them all into a single paragraph, you move beyond comedy and enter the realm of pure linguistic chaos.
You enter the domain of the word salad.
The word salad. This final segment of the transcript is where Colbert shifts from being a critic of the language to an active agent of syntactic destruction.
He really burns it all down.
I want to read Colbert's closing monologue in its entirety, because you really have to experience the density of the nonsense to appreciate the craftsmanship.
Go for it.
So Colbert sits at his desk, adopts the hyper-serious, measured cadence of a profound political commentator, and delivers this. I'm a little bit complicit with Ivanka here. If complicit is heretofore defined as I support her, which it timelessly doesn't, albeit it is not, Ivanka rises at the apex of sunshine and does a lot of good on a relative basis. In fact, the entire Trump family is a big part of an otherwise great country. And in conclusion, I might add, summarizing lastly, happy birthday.
It is a breathtaking piece of structural anarchy.
It completely overwhelms the brain's cognitive processing centers. I feel like my brain is trying to digest a jigsaw puzzle where someone has taken scissors and cut off all the interlocking edges.
Everything is just sliding off the table.
Everything. Let's unpack the linguistic mechanics of this chaos. What is he actually doing to the language here?
He is deploying a relentless barrage of semantic malapropisms and categorical errors.
A malapropism. That's like using the wrong word entirely, right?
Right. A traditional malapropism, named after the character Mrs. Malaprop in Richard Sheridan's 1775 play The Rivals, is the mistaken use of a word in place of a similar-sounding one.
Like saying dance a flamingo instead of flamenco.
Exactly. It is a phonetic error. But Colbert is executing semantic malapropisms.
How does that differ?
He is utilizing words that sound exceptionally high-register, legal, academic, profound, but he is placing them in syntactic slots where they possess absolutely no meaning.
So it's the ultimate manifestation of the register confusion we discussed earlier.
Precisely.
It is the linguistic equivalent of wearing a full tuxedo and top hat to a public swimming pool, jumping into the deep end, and swimming laps, just to prove to the lifeguards that you own a tuxedo.
That is such a vivid picture.
You are technically dressed up, but you are failing the context of the environment so spectacularly that the clothes become an absurdity.
That captures the aesthetic of the performance perfectly. Let's examine the specific vocabulary he chooses.
Okay, let's look at the words heretofore, timelessly, albeit apex.
These are words that signal intense academic or legal precision.
Yeah.
But look at how he pairs them. If complicit is heretofore defined, heretofore is an adverb meaning before now.
Right. And he immediately follows it with which it timelessly doesn't.
Timelessly implies an eternal state, lacking a beginning or an end.
He creates a catastrophic temporal contradiction within a single breath. Before now, it eternally doesn't mean that.
It is logical antimatter. The brain's prediction machine simply crashes.
It just gives up.
This mirrors Noam Chomsky's famous linguistic example. Colorless green ideas sleep furiously.
Oh, I've heard of that one.
Chomsky created that sentence to prove that a sentence can be completely grammatically correct in its syntax adjective, noun, verb, adverb, but remain entirely devoid of semantic meaning.
Colbert is creating the comedic equivalent of Chomsky nonsense.
He really is.
And then he delivers my favorite piece of the wreckage, albeit it is not.
Yes.
Albeit is merely a conjunction meaning although. So he is staring into the camera and seriously declaring, although it is not.
It isn't a complete thought?
It is a hanging clause that steps right off a cliff into nothingness.
But notice the macro structure of what he is accomplishing. This entire monologue isn't just random nonsense. It is the ultimate thematic payoff of the entire analysis.
He's weaving it all together.
He is stacking all the previously discussed linguistic errors into one giant collapsing tower of Jenga blocks.
All the callbacks are woven right into the syntax.
Right. He brings back complicit. He brings back the definitional retreat. If complicit is heretofore defined as I support her.
He is directly mocking the Humpty Dumpty attempt to unilaterally change a definition to win an argument.
Exactly. He brings back the polysemy of relative with the line, does a lot of good on a relative basis.
But because of the journey the audience has been on, that phrase now carries the dual echo of both proportion and nepotism.
It reminds the audience of the very first structural vulnerability he exploited.
And then he deploys the absolute kill shot.
The contrastive conjunction.
He brings back the structural failure of the contrastive conjunction, he says. In fact, the entire Trump family is a big part of an otherwise great country.
Let's do the mathematical parsing on that one, just as we did with the tweet about the nephew.
Okay, the linguistic math. The speaker establishes the general whole, an otherwise great country.
Great is a positive valence.
The word otherwise demands a contrast. Therefore, the specific element carved out of the whole, the Trump family, must mathematically represent the negative valence.
He did it again.
He used the broken, hypercorrected otherwise structure to deliver a mathematically perfect, logically inescapable insult.
It is stunning structural comedy. He is utilizing the grammar of the opponent to defeat them.
And how does he finally conclude this descent into madness?
With the most redundant ending possible.
And in conclusion, I might add, summarizing lastly, happy birthday.
He stacks 3 intensely redundant transition phrases. Conclusion adds, summarizing lastly.
Violating Grice's maxim of quantity by using far more words than necessary.
And then he punctuates the entire agonizing paragraph with the temporal category error from the baby tweet, happy birthday.
Why does this monologue work so incredibly well as a finale?
Because it operates on the principle of experiential learning.
Experiential learning.
Colbert doesn't just sit behind his desk and lecture the audience that the speaker's use of language is illogical. He constructs an entire reality using the speaker's exact linguistic philosophy.
Where definitions are fluid, time is arbitrary, and conjunctions don't matter.
Exactly. And he forces the audience to live inside that reality for 30 seconds.
He lets you feel, on a cognitive level, how impossible it is to understand someone who treats language as decoration rather than architecture.
He proves the premise through active demonstration.
It is the difference between reading a textbook about a bridge collapse and actually standing on the bridge while the rivets start popping out.
That's it, exactly. He is proving a fundamental truth about human communication. Vocabulary without underlying logic is simply noise.
You can arm yourself with a thesaurus.
Right. You can deploy all the multisyllabic, high-register words you want, heretofore, albeit complicit otherwise, atex.
But if you do not understand the structural constraints, the historical valence, and the mathematical function of those words, you are not speaking English.
You are merely generating phonetic sounds that happen to resemble a language.
It's analogous to someone memorizing the names of all the chess pieces, but refusing to learn the rules of how they move.
That's a great comparison.
You can sit at the board and scream, "Knight, bishop, rook," with supreme confidence. But if you attempt to slide a rook diagonally across the entire board, you're going to lose the game.
And worse, the grandmasters watching you are going to laugh.
And in this context, comedians are simply the grandmasters watching the board.
They are waiting for someone in power to make an illegal move.
Not just to mock them, but to point out that the rules still apply to everyone.
The rules are the rules.
So how do we synthesize this deep dive? We have taken a very short, seemingly simple late-night comedy segment, and we have riffed it down to its studs.
We covered a lot of ground today.
We really did. We have looked at the cognitive science, the philosophy, and the structural math behind the laughs. And what we have ultimately learned today is that language is a strict, unforgiving, and deeply democratic social contract.
It is a contract you cannot unilaterally opt out of simply because you want to sound more intelligent.
Or because you want to escape accountability in an interview.
Or because you aren't paying attention to the syntax of your own tweets.
The rules of language enforce reality.
They do. We examined the dangers of polysemy with the word relative.
We learned that when you utilize a word with multiple clustered meanings, you must be hyper-aware of the semiotic context you are creating.
If you leave a backdoor open, a comedian will exploit that cognitive ambiguity to reveal an underlying truth you might have preferred to keep hidden.
We explored the inherent negative valence of a word like complicit and the cognitive dissonance caused by the Humpty Dumpty fallacy.
You cannot unilaterally redefine a word with historical moral weight just to frame yourself in a positive light.
The definitional retreat causes a structural collapse, and the audience will reject the paradox.
We looked at the temporal pragmatics of timekeeping with the concept of birthdays.
We learned that when you violate the universally agreed-upon categories of time and measurement, you alienate yourself from the shared human experience,
leaving yourself completely open to a reductio ad absurdum critique that highlights your detachment from reality.
And finally, we mapped out the intense, unforgiving structural math of a contrastive conjunction like otherwise.
We learned about register confusion and hypercorrection.
If you attempt to use complex transitional syntax as mere decoration without understanding its mathematical function, you will write a garden path sentence that inadvertently insults your own family.
Or mathematically proves that your statement is dumb.
Comedians aren't just telling jokes. They are acting as the safety inspectors of the social contract.
They are the structural engineers.
When the bridge of public discourse starts swaying, because the bolts of syntax are loose and the definitions are crumbling, the comedian is the one who stands in the middle of the bridge and jumps up and down until it snaps.
Purely to prove to the public that it was broken to begin with.
They enforce the boundaries of meaning when speakers attempt to blur them.
Exactly.
So, listener, we want to address you directly as we wrap up this deep dive. The next time you are scrolling through your phone,
or you are watching a political interview,
or you hear a late-night monologue deconstructing something a public figure said, we want you to pause.
Do not just passively consume the punchline.
Listen for the hidden linguistic math making that joke work.
Become an active participant in the language game. Look for the polysemy, identify the semantic valence, spot the category errors, and the contrastive failures.
Because once you understand the cognitive science behind the humor, you begin to see the invisible architecture of language everywhere.
You can never unsee the code.
And as we leave you today, we want to offer one final, slightly provocative thought to mull over.
Okay, hit him with it.
We have spent this entire deep dive analyzing the highly publicized, massive linguistic blunders of figures on a national stage.
It is easy to laugh at the word salad when it is being served on television.
But let's turn the mirror inward for a moment. Think about your own daily communication.
Think about your office environment.
It's about the emails you send, the memos you draft, or the professional updates you post online.
Oh yeah, the realm of corporate jargon is an absolute minefield of hypercorrection.
Exactly. When we rely on jargon, buzzwords, or high-register vocabulary at work, simply to sound a little bit more authoritative.
When we tell our teams we need to synergize or pivot.
Or when we reach for words like heretofore or otherwise to make our ideas sound profound. How often are we inadvertently creating our own structural paradoxes?
How often are we accidentally writing equations that equal zero?
We have to ask ourselves, are we absolutely certain we understand the exact mathematical function of the words we are using to decorate our professional lives?
Because if we aren't, we have to face a very uncomfortable question about our own communication.
Are we actually transmitting meaning to the people around us? Or are we just performing the act of speaking?